Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the roar and grit of a medieval siege, where castles did not fend off invaders with magic or machines, but with boiling oil, arrow slits, and raw guts. Forget the polished towers and tidy drawbridges in storybooks. The real fight was brutal, relentless, and every moment was a test of nerve. Could you haul a cauldron of scalding pitch as stones pounded the walls? Could you pour molten oil through murder holes while enemy ladders clawed at your feet? So tonight, imagine yourself on those rain-soaked ramparts, with bow in hand and heart pounding as torches flicker in the dusk. Where are you tuning in from, and what time is it where you are? Drop us a comment. It is always incredible to see how far these walls reach. Now, dim the lights, pull your blanket tight, and brace yourself. Let us storm the battlements together. Your day begins before dawn, with the echo of enemy drums muffled across the moat, the glint of pikes beyond the curtain wall, and the chill bite of torchlight on damp stone. You stir on your thin straw pallet, laid against the castle's inner wall, the cold seeping through your wool tunic and biting your skin. Every joint aches from yesterday's labor and last night's fitful sleep. A rat scurries across the floor above your head, and you sit up blinking into the wavering torch glow. Your heart thuds in your chest as you steel yourself for the hours ahead. You rise slowly, pulling your leggings and padded gambeson on over your shift. The fabric is stiff with dried sweat and mud, but it feels like armor against the chill. You gather your leather boots and slip them on over bare feet, the rough soles sending a jolt of pain through your arches. An empty cup on the floor reminds you that water must wait until the guard's morning ration. For now, you must move quietly to avoid waking your bunkmates. In the corridor, the air is thick with the smell of damp moss and roasting barley. Torches are fixed in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows on the flagstone floor. You step softly past rows of cots, each occupied by fellow defenders in various states of readiness. Some lie snoring, wrapped in blankets that once offered warmth. Others sit groaning as they strap on breastplates and adjust leather belts heavy with pouches and hooks for weapons. You reach the armory just inside the gate tower. A slender beam of torchlight falls on rows of lances and pikes, each submerged in oil and polished by the castle smiths. You select a spear, its shaft smooth from countless hands and its metal head sharpened to a razor's edge. You heft it once to test the balance. It feels reassuringly heavy, a promise of defense against the host beyond the walls. A sentry raps twice on the wooden door, signaling the guard rotation. You step out onto the wall, walk the stone cool beneath your boots. A chill wind carries the scent of wet earth and wood smoke from the besiegers' fires. Through arrow slits, you catch glimpses of canvas tents pitched in concentric lines across the moat. Fires flicker inside them like watchful eyes. The drums have fallen silent for the moment, but you know they will start again once the sun climbs higher. You slip behind a merlon and wait until a senior guard passes authority to you. He points toward a distant tent and warns of enemy scouts prowling the trench. You nod and take your place, gripping the spear shaft, your knuckles whitening, sweat beads on your brow even in the cold, and you wipe it away on the sleeve of your gambeson. Far below the base of the wall, the moat water ripples in the torchlight. You catch the reflection of your own gauntleted fist in its surface. It trembles only slightly as you draw it back to rest on the spear's leather grip. Your ears strain for any sound beyond the faint drip of water and the distant caw of a raven perched on a battered siege tower. Minutes pass. You stand stock, still leaning your weight into the wall's embrasure. The castle's great bells toll softly from the keep, announcing the hour for morning prayers you won't hear until relief arrives. The sky begins to lighten just beyond the horizon, a pale band of grey turning slowly toward gold. You inhale, deeply tasting the chill on your tongue, and exhaling to settle your nerves. Suddenly, a horn blast echoes through the camp below. You duck instinctively behind the merlon, and hear the guards to your right shout warnings. From the enemy lines, a cloud of arrows whistles upward, tracing deadly arcs toward the chimney stacks of the castle roofs. You straighten and raise your spear tip to catch any arrow that might glance off the wall walk. A single bolt thuds into the timber, hoarding a foot from your boots, and splinters fly. The guard beside you yanks a horn from his belt and blows a sharp call that reverberates along the wall. At once, other defenders emerge from hidden doors carrying crossbows and longbows. They knock, quarrel and arrow, and return fire in a steady rhythm punctuated by the twang of bowstrings. You hold your breath until the hail of enemy bolts subsides. The drums from beyond the moat begin again, this time closer and more insistent. You tighten your grip on the spear and peer through the slit. Dark shapes swarm at the edge of the trench, constructing ladders and mantlets. Torches reveal faces hidden beneath leather helmets, their eyes glowing with fierce intent. You know the coming hours will test every skill you have learned in the yard and forge. You look back at the keep's arrow loopers who pour boiling oil and drop heavy stones through openings above the gate. A small flame flickers along the wall behind you, and your relief arrives. You lower your spear and step aside for the new guard to take over. You hand him a flask of water and feel the muscles in your shoulders unclench just enough to ease the ache. You rub your back against the cool stone to stretch your spine. Down in the courtyard, you join the cook's hearth, where coals seethe beneath a cauldron of porridge. The cook ladles a thick stew into wooden bowls and passes them out. You take one and perch on a bale of straw to shove spoonful after spoonful into your mouth. The warmth spreads, and the bitterness of hunger dulls beneath the savory grit. Your comrades crowd around, grabbing bowls and exchanging news of enemy movements. A trumpeter high on the wall signals the morning muster. You straighten at once, wipe porridge from your chin and tighten your belt. The clash of steel as armor is donned rings out through the yard. This day under siege will be long and harsh, but you feel sharper having tasted fear and flame already. You shoulder your spear and move toward the great gate where the captain awaits to assign positions. Torches are extinguished behind you, leaving only the dim sunrise at the wall tops. You raise your eyes to the ramparts and imagine the day's trials carved into each stone beneath your boots. You step into the fray, ready to stand between your home and the armies that would tear it down. You rise before the sun, shoulders stiff and knees crackling like old timber, and you realize your arms are already lined with soreness you did not earn yet. Every stone you lifted yesterday presses against your fingers. The coarse grain of the sandstone has torn skin from the palms of your hands and embedded tiny slivers that throb with each motion. Your back protests every step, as if the wall itself has reached around and gripped your spine. You might last an hour before your muscles seize or your spirit breaks. By mid-morning, you are so hungry that each breath feels heavy. Your stomach gnaws like a trapped animal. The bread ration at the cook's hut was little more than a stale half-loaf and tasteless porridge watered down to fill you only halfway. You swallow another chunk beneath a yawning lantern flame and force yourself to return to the scaffold. Each bite tastes of dust and cold sweat. Hunger drags on your morale as much as the cold wind. The sun beats down and turns the mortar in its barrel into chalk dust that clouds your lungs. You cough through the grit and try not to breathe too deeply. Every layer of lime and sand binds you tighter to the work because leaving your position to sneer at the injustice of it all would only earn you scorn from the foreman. You grit your teeth and smear a fresh dab of ointment on the raw skin of your hands, hoping to dull the pain enough to squeeze a trowel and guide another block. By the afternoon, the wind has shifted, and sleet begins to fall, cutting across every exposed inch of flesh. The rain freezes on your cloak, and turns your hood into a sheet of ice. You shiver so violently your teeth chatter, and it takes every ounce of will not to drop your hammer and curl up beside the forge. The blacksmith's warmth tempts you, but the foreman's bark reminds you that the keep will not build itself. You trudge back to the wall, each footstep cold agony. As evening approaches, you pause on the ladder to catch your breath. You lean against the splintered wood and look out across the half-built curtain wall. The tower you helped raise for a single day already seems to waver in the dying light. If you fell asleep now, you would tumble 10 feet and break more than your pride. You grit your teeth, haul yourself back onto the scaffold, and finish the final stone seam as darkness closes in. At last the call rings out to quit work for the night. Your bones ache with a dull, relentless throb. You lower your tools to the ground and step off the scaffold, every joint singing in protest. You head for the cook's tent, where the last of the stew awaits. One serving of watery broth with a few lumps of turnip stares up at you in a chipped wooden bowl. You eat it slowly, savoring each swallow even as you curse its blandness. That night your tent feels more like a coffin than a shelter. The rough canvas leaks every drop of rain, your straw mattress is flat and damp, and the cold seeps through every tuck of blanket. You roll onto your back and stare at the roof, counting each drip that falls on your nose. You try to find the slightest comfort in the knowledge that tomorrow you will repeat all of this. It is misery and madness, yet you know that those who endure these days are the ones whose names will echo through the halls. Still, you wonder if you could endure a single sunrise. Your wrists would give out under the weight of stone. Your fingers would bleed fresh these wounds faster than they can scar over, and your spirit would splinter cracking under the endless demands of the keep's ascent. You would hunger, you would freeze, you would dream of warmth, and beds that do not creak and shudder beneath your weight. And yet, through every breathe-burning climb and every marrow-deep chill, you would also discover something unexpected. You would learn what it means to stand with comrades whose sweat mingles with yours on each beam and block. You would find pride in the echo of your hammer and the straight line of a newly laid course. You would taste satisfaction in a day's final glance at walls you helped raise toward the sky. But a single day, and you would also understand why this work belongs only to the few who hunger for it. You would never last as a castle builder. At least, not beyond the first dawn. Your bones would beg for mercy, your fingers would plead for reprieve, and your back would break under a fraction of the burden. Yet, if by some stubborn miracle you endured, you would stand at sunset covered in mortar and mud and know that for a moment you helped craft something meant to endure. And in that memory alone, your blistered smile would burn as bright as any torch on the walls you barely survived. You haul your mattock from the pile at sunrise and shoulder its haft as you trudge toward the frozen earth. The air bites at your cheeks, and each breath clouds before you. Ahead, a line of sappers stands along the bank where the water table lies close to the surface. Their curved blades glint with frost. Today, you will carve the trench that must hold back siege towers and scaling ladders alike. You kneel at the edge of the bank, testing the snow crust with your boot. A second later, your blade bites into wet soil beneath a thin layer of ice. You lift the mattock and drive it home. The clay resists at first, then yields with a satisfying crack. You lean into the stroke, feeling the vibrations travel up your arms. Your breath hitches, but you do not pause. You dig deeply enough to break through to the waterlogged layer below. With each strike, you scoop loose earth aside and expose more of the bank. The trench must be wide enough to flood quickly and deep enough that wooden siege machines will founder before they reach the walls. You angle the mattock head to loosen clods and pry them free. The frost in the clay makes each chunk heavy and stubborn. You grunt as you haul one half frozen clump over your shoulder and drop it into a growing spoil heap. The spring sunlight slants low and glimmers on the frost crystals. Your comrades work in concert. One swings a pickaxe to break rocky roots, another shovels the loosened soil onto a sled, and a third hauls the sled to the spoil bank. You fall into this rhythm, strike all the way down, pick up, scoop, toss. Every motion flows into the next. The ache in your back grows, but your mind quiets, focused only on the next stroke. A lantern mounted on a stake near the trench casts a flickering glow that does little to chase off the cold. You double knot your tunic sash tighter against the breeze and reach for the water skin at your belt. The icy water sloshes against your ribs as you drink deeply. The chill in your chest reminds you that this is no ordinary labor, it is the lifeblood of the castle's defense. You set the water skin aside and return to the trench. Half a dozen paces down the line, a sapper unhooks a leather bucket filled with hot ashes and carries it close. He sifts a handful into the freshly dug trench where the clay still clings wet and sticky. The ashes slake against the damp soil and create a rough footing that will anchor the fence posts and earth revetments to come. You scoop another shovelful of earth and mix it with the ash before tossing it onto the spoil bank. As you work, you notice the quiet pride in each man's face. The huge task ahead makes small talk nearly impossible, but in the clatter of metal on earth, you share a sense of purpose. Each scoop brings you closer to a moat that will protect thousands of souls. You imagine archers on the parapets sending volleys of arrows into bogged-down attackers. That vision flexes your muscles with renewed energy. A shout comes from the foreman standing on a wooden platform overhead. He signals that you have reached the designed depth at this section. You pause and wipe sweat from your forehead even though the air is frigid. You crouch at the trench lip and peer down. The water table gleams dark at the bottom of the ditch. It pools faintly, promising to fill the trench once the rest of the bank is cut away. You smile, despite the cold. The foreman beckons, and you climb the ladder of wooden rungs lashed to a post. He hands you a plank of timber. Your next task is to nail in a row of stakes to help reinforce the inner side of the trench. You align the plank across 2 stakes buried at key intervals and hammer wooden pegs through pre-drilled holes. The board locks the stakes in place and forms a crude retaining wall. You repeat the process along the line, each plank adding strength to the trench's face. By midday, the trench's first 50 paces stand fully cut and reinforced. You step back to admire the neat profile. The earth walls are straight and true to the chalked lines. A narrow channel at the bottom holds the first dribble of spring water. Already the trench looks capable of drowning any wooden engine brought against it. You grip your mattock and raise it overhead to announce your readiness to continue. A baker's cart rumbles by on the road overhead. Straw bales in the cart smell of fresh grain and warm hearth. You realize you haven't eaten since morning. A comrade tosses down a cold loaf wrapped in cloth. You catch it with a grateful nod. You tear off a hunk and chew while you watch your fellows work the trench further along the bank. You finish your bite and flex your jaw before taking up the mattock again. Each section demands the same precision. The slope must be cut at the right angle so that the trench will hold water without slumping. You set 1 foot on the bank and guide your next strike at a 45-degree slant. Earth cracks away in long plates and falls into the channel below. A gust of wind sweeps across the moat site. You brace yourself and tighten your grip. Dust and soil swirl around the trench like restless spirits. You pause for a heartbeat to let the gust pass, then nod to the sapper beside you. He flicks his pickaxe like a conductor's baton and resumes the work. By afternoon, you have carved another 20 paces of moat. The trench deepens and widens under your toil. Sleds trundle back and forth, hauling soil away. The spoil bank grows into a low mound that will later serve as a firing platform for crossbows. Beyond that, the outer curtain wall is just visible through the haze of dust and cold air. The foreman checks your progress with a measuring rod. He nods approval and signals the team to break. You rest on your mat and breathe deeply. Every muscle hums with exhaustion, but you feel the quiet joy of accomplishment. In a single day, you have carved a watery barrier that will stand against siege engines and shield the castle keep. You wipe your face and join the sappers for a shared ration of cheese and salted meat. Conversation is sparse. Each man lifts his ration and nods in solidarity. You bite and taste the sharp tang of cheese and the smoky salt of the meat. Energy returns to your limbs. As dusk approaches, you take up your shovel one last time and help fill in any pockets of earth that threaten to collapse into the channel. You pack the clay firmly around the plank, supports, and smooth away loose soil. Finally, you step back from the trench and look at your handiwork. The moat is more than a ditch, it is proof of human resolve carved from frozen earth. You shoulder your tools and head toward the camp. Lanterns glow at the trench edge, marking its line. In the lamplit dusk, the moat gleams like a scar of promise. Tomorrow, sappers will deepen it further and connect it to the river source. But tonight, you can rest with pride. knowing that your labors will protect the castle and its people when the enemy arrives. You have dug the moat. You have earned your place among the builders. Now the sun hangs low and your muscles refuse to obey without protest. By midday, your shoulders ache as if someone has driven stakes through them, and laughter from your comrades sounds distant, like it belongs to someone else. Every stone you lift now feels twice its weight, and every step along the scaffold boards tests your resolve. You wipe sweat and mortar from your brow, though your clothes cling damp and heavy against your skin. The wind picks up and whistles through the battlement crenellations, carrying the promise of colder air. You pull your cloak tighter and steady the next block in place. Your fingers are raw where the rope has bitten into them, and the simple act of wrapping the sling around the block has become a torment. A call goes up for a mid-afternoon break, but at best you manage a few gulps of thin porridge served in a cracked wooden bowl before orders come to resume work. The master mason reminds you that every minute you rest is a minute the walls go unfinished and the castle remains vulnerable. You swallow the porridge, tasting grit and stale grain, and return to your post. Your comrades work in uneasy silence now. Each man feels the same weight bearing down on his back, every tendon screaming for relief. The sun begins its slow descent, and the light shifts across the stone face, casting long shadows that make the wall look like a wave frozen mid-crash. You steady your chisel and set to smoothing the mortar joints, one by one, erasing the traces of your hurried work from the morning. Each pass with the blade requires concentration. If you slip, you risk gouging the stone and delaying the entire course. You bite your lower lip against the effort, ignoring the metallic taste of adrenaline in your mouth. The expert mason beside you works silently, his movements fluid as water. You glance at his hands and wonder how he can shape stone all day without his own fingers splitting. Despite the hardship, there is pride in your work. Each straight joint and level course is a statement of your skill and perseverance. The castle will stand for generations, and your effort is part of that legacy. You remember stories of knights seeking refuge behind these very walls. You imagine families sleeping safely tonight because the walls you raise hold firm. That thought steels your resolve. As the light wanes your brigadier signals, it is time to set the final blocks of the day. The crane lowers the last monolith beside you. You guide it into place as dusk settles and torches are lit along the scaffold rails. The glow from the flames makes the stone shimmer with warm color even as the air grows cold. You slide the block into its slot and buttress it with wooden props until the mortar sets. The masons call halt. You climb down the ladder with trembling legs and help strike the scaffold that ran this section of wall. Planks are stacked and beams lashed together for tomorrow's work. The clang of mallets fades as the yard empties. Evening meal is a communal affair in the cook's tent. You join your fellow builders around a fire pit and share a pot of thick stew made of root vegetables, salted pork, and barley. The broth is rich and warming. You spoon it gratefully into your bowl and let the heat chase the chill from your bones. Around you, men swap stories of near misses when stones tumbled free and crushed boots, or when a sudden gust nearly sent someone over the edge. Laughter rings out despite ragged breath and sore limbs. After the meal, the smith brings out small flasks of watered ale. You pass one to each man and raise it in a silent toast to survival. Each swallow is bitter, but it does its work, dulling the ache and loosening muscles knotted from strain. You sit on a log beneath the tent's canvas and close your eyes as best you can in the flickering firelight. Tomorrow you will begin again, before dawn. The wall will be higher, the challenges greater, and the mortar setting faster in the cooler air. But as you sit among these men, you feel the bond of shared purpose. You have forged not only stone and mortar, but also friendship that glows hotter than any forge. As the embers die down, you stagger back to the labor quarters. Your body feels as if it has been carved from stone itself. You crawl onto your straw mattress and feel every splinter beneath you. Sleep is elusive though, exhaustion drags at your eyelids. You replay the day's work in your mind and wonder how your arms will hold up at dawn. Still, you smile. You have lived the life of a castle builder, and found in every blister and bruise a lesson in strength and humility. The walls will stand, because you endured. You drift into restless dreams of soaring towers and watchtowers, of banners fluttering atop turrets, of peasants seeking shelter behind the ramparts you helped raise. You wake hours later before the first torch is lit, every muscle humming with the promise of another day. You rise, stiff but determined, ready to lift stone again at first light. Few men dare this life, fewer still endure it. You would not last a day as many of us do, yet here you stand, a castle builder for a fleeting dawn, and in that you have found a measure of triumph. You step into the gatehouse before dawn light has broken, feeling the chill of stone underfoot. Torches flicker along rough walls as you approach the great oak beams lying ready on the floor. Each beam is hewn to exact length and notched at one end to fit into the drawbridge frame. Your breath puffs in the cool air as you shoulder your tools and prepare for the first lift. A pair of long timbers form the bridging deck itself. You and 3 comrades position them side by side across the gate gap, aligning the notches with iron pins driven into the jambs. The wood is damp from last night's rain and makes a low groan as it settles into place. You step back to check spacing against the chalk lines on the threshold and nod in approval. The planks sit flush and true. Next comes the lifting frame inside the gate tower. Heavy oak uprights rise 8 feet above the floor, joined by crossbeams secured with wooden pegs. A massive windlass sits between the uprights, its drum wrapped with thick hemp rope. You oil the axles with animal fat and turn the handle a few times to test the movement. The mechanism creaks smoothly, promising enough mechanical advantage to raise the bridge under load. Beyond the gate arch, you can see the moat shimmering faintly in pre-dawn light. The water is still and cold. You imagine the wooden bridge lying flat across the water like a threshold into a new world. Today you will master the machinery that controls life and death for every soul inside the walls. Your foreman calls for the first beam. You and 2 comrades hook stout iron rings around each end of the first timber and sling the rope beneath. You double-check the knot and then give a nod. From above, the lift crew begins turning the windlass. The rope draws taut, and the beam inches upward. You guide it as it rises, keeping it balanced so it does not scrape the stone arch. At chest height, the beam wobbles slightly, and you grip a handhold carved into the timber. You sense every twist and buck through your grip. A single misstep here could send the beam crashing back into the moat. You rest your weight on your right foot and push gently against the wood to steady it. When the beam clears the arch, you pivot toward the frame on the far side. Comrades guide the beam laterally until the notched end drops over a pin. The rope slackens and you slide the beam into place. It fits snugly with a tight click. You step back and signal that the first beam is secure. Now you attend to the second beam. It must align perfectly with the first to form a level deck. You haul it from the pile and repeat the process. The windlass team works in unison, and the frame lifts with less effort now that you have the first brace in place. You guide the second beam as it passes overhead and thread it into the matching notch. With both primary beams in place, you lay the bridging planks across them. Each board is hammered into wooden sockets to prevent movement when the bridge is raised or lowered. You test each plank with your knee to ensure no give. Even a small gap could trap a foot or crack under weight in battle. Next, you test the raising mechanism. You climb onto the bridge deck and fasten a runaway rope to a ring in the center. From windlass, you give the handle a few turns. The bridge rises slowly, pivoting on bronze pins at the threshold. You feel the rope strain against your knot. When the bridge has lifted a foot, you shout down to the windlass team to hold fast. Above you, the drawbridge pit narrows, and you guide the deck between wooden guides set in the stone. The sunk pit keeps the bridge from swinging wildly in the wind. You serve as a spotter, watching every corner of the deck as it slips upward. Your cloak flaps in the breeze, and you press it close to your body. At the top of the arc, you call out the position and the team stops turning. The drawbridge sits nearly vertical against the wall, its deck tightly pressed into the pocket. You knot the rope around a ratchet gear to lock it in place. The mechanism clicks and ratchets hold firm under tension. A rib-shaking cheer rises from the men below as you test the release. You turn the ratchet pawl and the wood groans as it slides downward until the deck locks into the closed position. You smile as oak meets stone. The gate is fully secured against any would-be invader. Daylight breaks in earnest now, and you adjust fenders on the underside of the bridge that channel raindrops away from the gate hinges. You wipe sweat from your forehead and check each iron strap for tightness. The drawbridge must function silently to surprise attackers and yet be rock solid when closed. Your foreman inspects the work and nods in satisfaction. He instructs you to lower and raise the bridge one more time for training purposes. You grasp the winch handle and give it 2 complete turns. The deck rises smoothly. You call down for constables to stand guard at the gate. Then, with a twist of the ratchet and a shove, you lower the bridge quickly to block the archway. A young page runs forward carrying buckets of sand, which he dumps into the moat to test the fit of the bridge deck. You watch the fine grains sift through the boards as water laps beneath. The bridge stops 2 inches above the water. Too high to float free, but low enough to allow carts and horses to cross. A fine balance of height and clearance. Satisfied, you climb down and help oil the ratchet pawl and windlass drum. You pack grease into every moving part to protect against rain and ice. Each mechanism receives a careful pass with a cloth before you store the oil horn back in your belt. As the sun climbs you and the bridge stand ready, you imagine the peace of daily traffic crossing beneath, unaware of the dark pit yawning below. You imagine the terror of an enemy seeing the bridge rise silently to a vertical line against the wall, blocking passage and sealing doom. You shoulder your tools and step back onto solid ground. The drawbridge commands respect and fear in equal measure. You have woven its grace and strength into the castle's defenses. Every notch cut, every rope coiled, every ratchet clicked was a promise that here the builder stands between safety and ruin. Tomorrow you will return to maintain each pin and pulley so that no siege engine may breach these walls. But for now, you join the convoy back to camp, carrying a sense of pride heavier than any beam. Your hands are raw with rope burn and grain scratches from the oak. Your back aches from lifting loads that defy mortal strength. Yet in your heart is the satisfaction of steel and wood bent to human will. You have raised the drawbridge, and in doing so you have helped build a fortress that will stand for centuries. You rise before sunrise, bones still humming from yesterday's work, and step onto the scaffold that creaks beneath each footfall. The memory of yesterday's hammer blows still echoes in your arms, but today you face not just stone and mortar, but the promise of something greater. As you clamber up the ladder, you feel the chill of dawn on your face and breathe in the crisp air that smells of dew and fresh-hewn timber. Below you, the courtyard is already stirring with labourers hauling water barrels and carting mortar. You steady yourself on the platform and glance at the wall face you helped raise. Each block you placed is a testament to effort and skill. You think of how your hands once trembled, unaccustomed to chisel and hammer, and now move with practiced confidence. The wall stands taller than you, its surface stepped in neat courses of limestone and mortar ribbons that gleam in the early light. You run a hand along the rough stone and feel the vibrations of generations who toiled here before you. Today's work will finish the final course on this section of wall. The master mason has drawn chalk lines marking where each block must sit. You gather your tools and step forward. The crane team lowers the first block, and you and 2 comrades guide it into place. The block settles with a deep thud that resonates like an exclamation point in the still air. You tighten the blade of your trowel knot by knot until the mortar bed holds the stone firmly. The second block is smoother still because you and the masons have learned each other's rhythms. There is a quiet grace in this shared labor. As you work, You recall the young recruit who arrived last month, unable to lift a chisel without trembling. He now stands across the platform guiding blocks with the assurance of a veteran. You share a nod of acknowledgement. This camaraderie built on sweat and grit is stronger than any fortress wall. Each man here knows that no single person can raise these stones alone. It takes teamwork and trust in each other's strength and skill. At midday, the course is nearly complete. The sun warms your back despite the breeze. You pause to wipe the sweat from your brow and take a drink from your leather flask. The water is cool and satisfying. You rest for only a moment because the foreman signals that the final block is in place. With careful hands, you apply the last ribbon of mortar and smooth it until it matches the courses below. The wall is whole at last, its top row flush and true beneath your trowel's edge. You step back to admire the line you helped finish. The masons above set iron clamps across the joints and brush away any excess mortar. A sense of pride swells in your chest. This section of wall will stand for centuries. Soldiers will march atop it. Archers will draw their bows from its crenellations. Merchants in the market below will feel safer knowing you and your comrades built this barrier. You feel a quiet satisfaction deeper than any cup of ale. Down below the coachmen lead wagons loaded with fresh stone for the next phase of construction. You descend the ladder and help unload blocks. The afternoon passes in steady rhythm. You shape the next batch of stones at the mason's bench, cutting them with chisels and smoothing them with rifflers. Each fragment you chip away brings the block closer to its destined place. In that repetition, you find a meditative focus that clears your mind of worry and doubt. As evening nears, you gather at the central keep's base for the daily reckoning. The foreman counts each block and checks the work against the master plan drawn on parchment. When he announces that today's quota is met, you feel a surge of relief and pride. Your arms ache, but you stand taller. The men around you pat each other on the back and share a warm grin. Despite the cold and the endless toil, you have accomplished something tangible and lasting. A servant brings bowls of pottage heated over the brazier. You spoon the thick soup into your mouth, savoring the warmth in your belly. A hunk of coarse bread is pressed into the stew and soaks up the broth. You eat slowly and appreciate each bite, knowing that tomorrow will bring more work and more hunger. But for tonight, you savor this well-earned meal. After supper, you gather around the fire pit where lanterns cast dancing light. Stories of ancient builders are told, of walls that withstood sieges and towers that touched the heavens. You imagine your own name joining those of the masons who carved and laid stones long ago. You feel connected to a legacy built not by kings alone, but by the countless hands that shaped each block. Before you return to your quarters, you walk to the edge of the outer wall and gaze out over the lands. The river snakes through fields and forests. Smoke rises from distant smokehouses. The sun sets behind the hills in a blaze of color. The castle stands as a crown upon the earth. You rest your palm on the stone and feel its cool solidity beneath your fingers. Tonight, as you lie on your straw mattress, you feel every ache from head to toe. Your bones throb in time with the echoes of hammers and winches that will never fully quiet. Yet sleep comes easily because you know you have earned it. You have wrestled stone and mortar into a shape that will shelter hundreds and deter thousands more. You have lived a life of hands in earth and stone and found purpose in every blister and bruise. Tomorrow the sun will climb again, and the wall will grow taller still. You will rise before dawn and climb the ladder, oilskin cloak heavy on your shoulders, heart light with determination. You would not last a day as a castle builder, you used to think. But having seen your work stand strong against wind and rain, having felt the pride that sweat can forge, you know that anyone can endure far more than they believe when they build with their own hands and stand together as one. You arrive at the gatehouse before first light and find the massive oak doors already swung wide. Frost glints on wrought iron bands. Your breath puffs in the chill as you shoulder a heavy iron portcullis and begin the awkward dance of sliding it into its vertical grooves. The metal is slick with dew and small drips form where it catches the weak morning light. You brace your feet against the stone sill and lean in, guiding the bar through the slot. It grinds against the iron runners with a deep rasp that echoes down the corridor. Once the portcullis is seated, you step back and yank on the heavy chain to test the fit. It rumbles as it moves a fraction upward, then locks solid. You tug again until the links bristle against the mechanism. No give remains. You smile at the promise of that weight pressing down in an attack, a solid wall of metal to hold back invaders. Next, you turn to the massive wooden doors on either side. They are built of thick planks bound by iron bands and studded with bolts the size of fists. With your apprentice beside you, you push against one door until its swing knocks a heavy bar into the catch. The bar rattles as it seats itself. You press in and out until the door is flush with the jamb. You repeat on the other side. When both doors are closed, the only gap left is the narrow slit of the portcullis grooves. You kneel before one lock and lift the heavy key from its hook. The lock plate is polished brass with raised ridges marking its wards. You insert the key and twist until the tumblers click into place. The bolt slides clear with a smooth thunk. You flip the large ring of the lock away from the door and slot it into the keeper. That lock is tested against the bar you slid earlier. It holds firm. Walking around the gatehouse, you push and pull at each panel, listening for any telltale creak that might hint at weakness. The large doors stand immovable, and the portcullis chain remains taut. You nod to your apprentice, and he folds his arms in satisfaction. The next step is reinforcing the inner gate room. You carve new iron bands to strengthen the second set of doors behind the portcullis. The smith has provided strips of hot iron and short lengths of iron strap. You heat them until they glow orange, then hammer them flat on the anvil. You carry each strip to the gatehouse and haul your maul against the stone threshold to check its stability. Each impact jangles through metal locks and echoes in the tower above. You test a band for snug fit, then drive heavy pegs to tie the strap across the door planks. You work methodically from bottom to top, each band serving as extra armor against battering rams. Between the two doors, you clear a narrow firing slit carved long ago into the stone. It widens only a few inches, but offers a line of sight and a place to bristle your crossbow or drop boiling water if attackers breach the outer gate. You wipe away the grime and check the wooden shutter on the inside. The hinged board swings free with a low creak. You prime your crossbow bolt in the notch and aim down the slit. The sight lines are clear. A rock 50 paces away would be straightforward to hit. You release the bolt and watch it strike true against the far wall. The sound reverberates back. Your apprentice catches your bolt and hands it back. He peers down the firing slit, then looks up at you. You give him a curt nod, and he snaps the shutter closed. The bolt remains lodged, but the shot has proven the slit's utility. You step into the guard room and scan the walls. Hooded lanterns hang from hooks. You ignite one with flint and steel. The feeble flame illuminates iron racks where maces, spears, and crossbows wait. You check each clamp and cord, gently tugging the weapons to confirm they are secured. A spear rattles once, then rests, still. The crossbow mount clicks firmly. You walk the length of the rack, flicking your finger across each trigger guard. All are ready. The final task is the portcullis winch. You lace thick gloves onto your hands and approach the capstan above the inner doors. A thick metal rod juts through a wooden wheel, ringed by iron spikes for grip. Two men stand ready to rain, blows on the capstan arm to raise or lower the portcullis. You twist the central axle by hand and find it stiff. You look at the chain and see a link caught in a worn tooth of the ratchet wheel. You oil the joint with a small flask of rendered animal fat from your pouch. You twist again. The chain groans and gives way. You test the weight. The portcullis lifts smoothly under one man's effort now. You stand back and admire your work. The gatehouse doors are secured, each lock sealed, the portcullis chain tensioned and the winch mechanism oiled. Inside the guardroom, weapons hang within easy reach, and the firing slit is proven true. Yet, you do not relax. Sappers might tunnel beneath or seek hidden caves nearby. You tap the stone floor with your mallet, listening for hollows. Each strike reveals solid rock beneath. Satisfied, you tap again at the mortar line between blocks. Each thud is dull and confident. As the sun sets, you extinguish the lantern and answer the call from the guard on the wall above. He has sighted movement in the valley beyond the castle. You ready a torch and head upstairs to join him. The route is narrow and steep, but each step is well worn by soldiers on patrol. You reach the lookout platform and peer out. Twilight mist shrouds rolling fields. You hear the distant cry of watchdogs and the rumble of cartwheels. Your apprentice arrives bearing a horn of spiced wine. You drink deeply, feeling warmth flood your chest. The guard hands you a pair of fine woolen gloves and a round shield. You slip them on as you lean against the battlement. Below, the gatehouse stands ready for another night. Together you watch the shadows lengthen. The valley will soon be pitch dark. You feel the weight of responsibility settle across your shoulders, but it is a weight you know how to carry. Tonight the gate stands firm under your vigilance. In the morning, you will descend to test each lock again, oil the winch, and inspect the hoarding above. You are a castle builder and a guardian now. It is a mantle heavy with expectation and honor. You ready your torch for the next night's watch, knowing that every sunrise is a small victory. You wake before dawn with every limb screaming in protest, but the call of the work bell drags you upright anyway. Your arms are so stiff, your shoulders feel fused to your neck. You gulp cold air and taste grit in the back of your throat from yesterday's stone cutting. Before you even find your boots, you know today will be just as brutal as the last. You dress in the same mud-caked tunic and breeches, the fabric stiff and rough against your skin. You lace your boots with numb fingers that still ache from gripping chisels. Your nails are cracked and flecked with stone dust. You pull on your leather gloves only to find they tore at the fingertips by noon yesterday. You discard them and resign yourself to more bleeding. A steaming bowl of gruel awaits in the cook tent. It tastes of watery porridge, salt, and burnt grain. You swallow it quickly, though every chew grinds your sore jaw. There is no time to savor flavor, only time to fuel aching muscles. Outside, the scaffold still leans against the half-finished tower wall. Rain has broken the morning clouds and drips steadily from wood and stone. The rope bindings are slick and sagging. You climb the ladder, each rung demanding every inch of your limited strength. Halfway up you pause, feeling the metal chisel strapped to your belt, a reminder of the cuts you dealt to yesterday's stone. Your thigh muscles tremble. You swallow bile and press on. On the platform you join the small team of masons and laborers. They greet you with grim nods. No one dares smile. The mood is silent, solidarity and shared misery. Mason tools glint in the grey light. Hammers, chisels and moulds of mud and straw all await your touch. The block hall team lowers a massive stone slab into place. You grab a guide rope and brace your back. The weight strains your hands until the knuckles whiten. You guide the block against yesterday's layer of mortar. A mason above taps it with a mallet. The thwack echoes in your bones. He holds up a straight edge. The block is high on one corner. You wrench a wooden lever and pry it down by millimeters. The difference is small but crucial. You taste sweat and grime on your lips. Next, you squirt a rag with water and wipe the seam clean. You wish you could wash your whole body, but there is no bath until the workday ends. Dust coats every surface. Your lungs feel clogged, your eyes gritty. You blink tears to clear them. Up comes a fresh bundle of mortar, hauled in a basket by the crane. You dip your trowel into the mix. The lime paste clings and oozes between your fingers. You smear it into the joint, trying not to think of the burns that will flare on your skin from this caustic paste. The master mason checks your work and nods once, then moves on. You feel a flicker of pride before fatigue drowns it. Suddenly the wind shifts and whips through the gap in the wall. It carries a spray of cold rain straight at your face. You shudder and press your shoulders into the scaffold post. The rain pummels the stone with a hollow drum beat. Mortar softens and mortar lumps drip down. You curse and grab the brush to sweep it away before the next block arrives. Morning gives way to midday. The sun breaks through momentarily, warm enough to scorch your arms through your tunic. You gulp the heat before the wind returns colder than ever. You wonder if your body will ever acclimate, or if you will spend the rest of your life shivering and sweltering in equal measure. Your stomach rumbles, but there is no break until the foreman orders one. You descend the ladder like a man moving underwater. Your legs tremble so badly you nearly misstep. On the ground, you find stale bread and leftover stew that congealed into a grey slab overnight. You bite into it anyway. The spoon scrapes against hardened fat plaques. You choke it down. An apprentice offers you a swig of watered wine. You sip it gratefully. The sour tang stings your throat, but it carries a warmth you welcome. You prop your elbows on a barrel and let the world blur around you. After 20 minutes, the bell rings, and you climb back into the fray. This time, you help hoist planks for the next hoarding level. You haul boards, nailed to beams, and wedge them into place. Each plank is heavy and splintered. You pray you will not lose your grip and fall. As you secure a board, you catch sight of the valley below, where fields are cut into neat squares. In that moment, you imagine the view once this tower stands tall and complete. You picture horizon lines uninterrupted by stone, sky stretching forever. You allow yourself that small hope before guilt settles in. You cannot dream of finish lines today. There is only the next lift, the next chisel strike, the next seam filled. Late afternoon brings the day's final mortar lift. You work on numbing autopilot, applying paste, pressing blocks, testing level. Your arms burn like coals. Your back bends in protest. You feel every muscle fiber twist and ache. When the last block is set, the foreman dismisses the scaffold crew. You climb down again, ankles almost giving way. At ground level, you help break down a section of scaffold for tomorrow's reuse. You gather ropes, untie knots, stack beams. Your hands are red and raw from the lash points. You trudge back to camp in near silence. The cook offers a mug of thin broth. You sip and feel warmth flood your chest. The thought of sleep feels almost divine. You wash your face with cold water, flinching at the sting. You discard your tunic by the trough and slip on a drier one that still smells of wood smoke. That night you collapse onto your straw pallet. Your body trembles with exhaustion and pain. You can hardly feel your legs. Your fingers tingle as if asleep. You stare at the dark ceiling, listening to the wind shake the outer walls and the drip of water from the eaves. You remember every moment of the day's labor, the weight of stone, the sting of rain, the crackle of fire in the forge, the chorus of mallets on stone. A single thought coils in your mind. If one brief day can leave you broken, imagine a lifetime. You close your eyes and drift between consciousness and dream. In your fevered sleep you see yourself atop the tower, chiseling arrow slits, raising hoardings, carving the battlements. You feel the cold wind again and a hand on your shoulder urging you forward. You wake with a start and realize it was the ringing of dawn's bell in your head. You sigh deep and understand the truth. A castle builder is a creature of endless toil, of sweat and stone and steel and sacrifice. You are not sure you could endure one more day, and yet somehow you must. Because the walls will not build themselves, and the keep will not rise alone. If you can bear the agony for even a single day, you will earn something beyond respect. The knowledge that you shaped history with your own blistered hands. You clamber onto the narrow wall walk just as midday rain begins to pelt the ramparts, water sluicing down your shoulders and pooling in the hollow of your gauntlet. The plank hoardings creak beneath your boots, each soaked board threatening to slip away. You grip the rough-hewn battlement and steady yourself against the wind that swoops across the parapet. Your breath clouds in the chill air as you set to work, placing the final plank of the hoarding ledge. The hoarding will give your archers cover as they fire down on anyone foolish enough to approach the wall's base. You lift the heavy oak board, its surface dark with rain, and slide it into the grooves carved the day before. Splinters bite your fingers, but you grit your teeth and press the board home. A quick rap with your mallet drives it flush against the supporting beams. You step back and inspect the fit. Not a single gap remains. Next, you turn to the machicolations over the gatehouse. These stone projections will allow you to pour boiling oil or hurl rocks onto assailants trapped below. You heft a rough slab of limestone from the scaffold deck. It is heavier than you expected, slick with moisture, and your arms protest the sudden strain. You steady the stone on your shoulder and shuffle along the wall walk until you reach the carved sockets waiting to receive it. You wedge it into place and tap the top edge with your hammer until it settles with a satisfying grind against its neighbors. Rain hisses on the floor of the wall walk, carrying grit that scours your boots like sandpaper. You shift position to clear a drain slot, prying away a clog of mud and straw that would otherwise send water cascading onto the soldiers below. A sudden gust nearly dislodges you, but you catch the iron ring set into the wall. Heart pounding, you slip back into rhythm, prying and clearing until the rainwater sluices freely through the spout. Every so often you pause to catch your breath and survey the view. Through the mist, you can just make out the sheen of the moat and the curve of the outer bailey. Your fellows toil below at the drawbridge, hauling on ropes to raise and lock it in place. Far to the east, the forest edge is faintly visible. Beyond that lies the road that any would-be attacker must travel. You imagine their horses splashing through the moat and soldiers scrambling up ladders, only to find your machicolations waiting. A grim satisfaction warms you despite the cold rain. A comrade appears at the corner of the hoarding, holding a bucket of boiling oil still flickering with embers. He passes it to you with a grunt. You lift it carefully, feeling the warmth seep through the wooden handle that has been wrapped with cloth for insulation. You set the bucket on the wall walk, and with a small iron ladle, you fill the oil trough above the gate slit. The hot liquid hisses as it's the cold stone. You test the lever mechanism that will tilt the trough and release the oil below. It works smoothly. You wipe a bead of sweat from your brow, even in the chill. Rain slackens, but refuses to cease. You strip off your soaked surcoat and ring it over the wall walk. The water drips into the battlements like a steady drumbeat. You resume hammering in the final wooden pins that secure the front edge of the hoarding. Each pin drives the board deeper into its support beams. The wood creaks and settles as the pin bites home. A sudden clang echoes from below. You look over the parapet and see a patrol of archers testing the rain-slicked hoarding floor. Their boots splash and their arrows hiss as they snap loose shafts into the distant field. They call up that the new battlements feel firm, even under volley fire. You smile and lift a hand in silent acknowledgement. You take a moment to rest your hammer on your thigh. Your fingers are stiff, your knuckles raw. You brush a strand of wet hair from your face and survey the work. The hoarding now spans the length of the wall, broken only by the towers that loom overhead. The machicolations are all in place, their sockets bristling with sharpened edges that promise doom to any who approach. A heavy drumbeat sounds from within the keep. The captain is calling the end of work for the day. You retrieve your tools and stow them in the leather pouch at your belt. You coil the spare rope beside the hoarding support and tighten the knots that hold the ladder in place. The wall walk is now sealed and ready for defenders at first light. Descending the ladder, plank by plank, you feel gravity pull the chill from your mind. By the time you reach solid ground, your boots squelch with mud and grease. You make your way to the servant's tent for fresh tunic and broth. Every muscle screams in protest, but you carry pride in your chest. Today, you helped transform bare stone into a fortress of wood, iron, and fire. The wind picks up as the enemy siege tower creaks into view against the grey sky. Rain hammers the hoarding floor, turning each soaked plank into a slick slide. You skid forward, brace your elbow against the battlement, and knock an arrow. Through the narrow slit you spot the first soldier peering over his timber shield. You draw back and let fly. The shaft whistles past his ear and thuds into the tower's frame. He yanks his shield tighter. You grit your teeth. Perfect. Below, the oil trough you filled earlier drips hot residue onto the packed earth. A comrade swears as he scrapes away the splatter, cursing the day he volunteered for this post. You offer him a rag, and he mumbles a thanks through chattering teeth. Despite the cold, the furnaces of your fury burn hotter than any forge. A shout erupts from across the wall. You pivot and catch sight of rats scurrying along the outer ledge, frenzied by the storm. One particularly plump rodent skitters under your boot, and you nearly pitch forward. You snatch at the nearest stake to steady yourself, and curse the vermin's timing. A moment later, you tuck the mishap into grim humor. After all, nothing says medieval life like rat surprise. Rain pulls in the arrow slit. You press your bow against the stone to keep your footing and slide the water away with your cloak. The enemy tower edges closer, its wheels churning mud like hungry beasts. You lean out and pour a ladle of boiling pitch through the machicolation above the gate. It screams as it meets the wooden shield of the tower, sending up a sizzling cloud. The soldiers inside yelp and scramble back, granting you a moment's mercy. That mercy dies when a volley of enemy arrows arcs overhead. You duck beneath the hoarding cover and taste the thunder of each bolt against wood. Splinters fly at your boots. You kick them free, and breath catches in your throat. You nearly stepped on one. You itch to join the archers farther along the wall who rain fire into the attackers. But your task is to hold this section. You tighten your grip on the rain-slicked railing and steel yourself. A heavy stone slab jars loose from the scaffold behind you and tumbles toward the wall walk. You lunge, catch its corner, and twist it back into place with a grunt that echoes like a hammer blow. The slab thuds against the support beam. You press a gauntleted hand to your chest, heart pounding. You glance down. The drop below snarls with mud and rodent shadows. No good thinking of that now. Above you, the battlements creak as crossbow bolts thwack steel. Your comrade next to you fires a quarrel that splinters on the siege tower's plating. He curses again and reloads. You offer a quick nod of solidarity. This is your tribe, the soaked, sleepless defenders of stone. You remember the face of the young page who brought you that flask of spiced wine yesterday. You picture him now, huddled in the guardroom, waiting for your return. Cold rain drives into your tunic. You lift a scrap of cloth and wipe it across your brow, smearing grit into your hair. You shiver, but your fingers remember the arc of release. You knock arrow after arrow, aiming for any gap in their makeshift armor. Each shot is a prayer you mutter silently. Keep them back, keep them off the wall, keep them from breaching your home. Suddenly, a loud crack rings from the hoarding above you. A beam splinters under the weight of water, and you leap forward to catch the falling wood. You cradle it at your feet and jam it into a nearby notch, hammering it with your bow's pommel until it locks. The board shudders, but holds. A cheer rises from the crumbling crew beside you. Relief floods your chest until you remember the attackers are still out there. You hack at the loosened end of the plank with the butt of your arrow, scrub away soaked splinters, and brace the edge with a scrap of rope. It's crude, but enough. You wipe the sweat from your palms, slick now from rain and pressure, and step back to test it. The board quivers under your weight but does not yield. You pump a fist and grin despite the cold. A flash of triumph warms you. Then a volley of stones rains down from the siege tower's mangonel. One pebble thuds against the hoarding floor a foot from your boot and skitters away. You hiss and lean out, spotting the rotor arm swinging above the attacker's head. You mark the pattern and release an arrow into its mechanism. The bolt lodges in a wooden brace. The tower shudders and the mangonel team flees, giving you clear sight once more. You seize the moment. You shrug off your cloak to free your arms and heft a skillet of boiling oil from its iron hook. Each step is deliberate. You balance the skillet's handle, drag the tripod across the hoarding floor, and position yourself above the gate. A shout from the captain echoes. Enemy ladders are going up. You wrench the lever, and molten oil chases down the wooden rungs. Screams from below mix with the hiss of boiling fat. The stench of cooked wood and charred flesh drifts upward. You swallow hard and steady your trembling hand. The ladder below glows red as the oil eats into the wood. Enemy climbers tumble, hollering in panic. You bite back a triumphant laugh. Survival has its grotesque rewards. You peer ahead. Their retreating forms vanish into the mud. For a heartbeat, the battlefield stills. Your chest heaves. You cup your hands and warm them on your own breath. Frost mingles with sweat on your brow. Through the swirling rain, you scan for the next threat. The siege tower has shifted down the line. Patrols reveal fresh crags in the hoarding, gashes from enemy tools. You sprint along the wall walk, boots spitting water, and slam your hammer into the cleft, sealing it with a wedge of oak. Splinters rain down. You laugh. Pain and pride are the same heat in your veins. A sudden silence blankets the ramparts. You grip your spear, ready for a counterattack. Instead, a horn blast from the keep signals the approach of relief forces. Torches flicker along the inner curtain walls, and archers take up fresh crossbows. You exhale so hard, your lungs ache. The final push will soon come. Rain slackens to a drizzle. Mud drips from every edge. You wipe your blade clean on your gambeson and glance at your comrades. Eyes meet and nod. Tomorrow you may be posted elsewhere. Tonight you will drink warm broth and rest blistered hands. But on this wall, for these soaked minutes, you held firm. You stood between home and ruin on boards. You shored up in half a storm in arms, heavy with fatigue and fury. You survived scaling the curtain walls and defending them with every battered breath. The captain's voice rises. Stand down. You sheathe your spear, lower your hood, and step back from the parapet. Your boots squelch on the hoarding as you make way. Behind you, the mangled siege tower leans into the moat, splintered and smoking. You feel wonder at what you accomplished, and relief that you can stop. As you descend the ladder, each rung reverberates with the day's labor. By the time you reach solid ground, exhaustion wraps around you like a cloak thicker than any gambeson. But in your chest burns a furious pride. You survived, you defended, you are part of this fortress now, its stones, its walls, and its strange, unbreakable heart. The wind picks up as the enemy siege tower creaks into view against the grey sky. Rain hammers the hoarding floor, turning each soaked plank into a slick slide. You skid forward, brace your elbow against the battlement, and knock an arrow. Through the narrow slit, you spot the first soldier peering over his timber shield. You draw back and let fly. The shaft whistles past his ear and thuds into the tower's frame. He yanks his shield tighter. You grit your teeth. Perfect. Below, the oil trough you filled earlier drips hot residue onto the packed earth. A comrade swears as he scrapes away the splatter, cursing the day he volunteered for this post. You offer him a rag, and he mumbles a thanks through chattering teeth. Despite the cold, the furnaces of your fury burn hotter than any forge. A shout erupts from across the wall. You pivot and catch sight of rats scurrying along the outer ledge, frenzied by the storm. One particularly plump rodent skitters under your boot, and you nearly pitch forward. You snatch at the nearest stake to steady yourself, and curse the vermin's timing. A moment later, you tuck the mishap into grim humor. After all, nothing says medieval life like rat surprise. Rain pools in the arrow slit. You press your bow against the stone to keep your footing and slide the water away with your cloak. The enemy tower edges closer, its wheels churning mud like hungry beasts. You lean out and pour a ladle of boiling pitch through the matriculation above the gate. It screams as it meets the wooden shield of the tower, sending up a sizzling cloud. The soldiers inside yelp and scramble back, granting you a moment's mercy. That mercy dies when a volley of enemy arrows arcs overhead. You duck beneath the hoarding cover and taste the thunder of each bolt against wood. Splinters fly at your boots. You kick them free, and breath catches in your throat. You nearly stepped on one. You itch to join the archers farther along the wall who rain fire into the attackers. But your task is to hold this section. You tighten your grip on the rain-slicked railing and steel yourself. A heavy stone slab jars loose from the scaffold behind you and tumbles toward the wall walk. You lunge, catch its corner, and twist it back into place with a grunt that echoes like a hammer blow. The slab thuds against the support beam. You press a gauntleted hand to your chest, heart pounding. You glance down. The drop below snarls with mud and rodent shadows. No good thinking of that now. Above you, the battlements creak as crossbow bolts thwack steel. Your comrade next to you fires a quarrel that splinters on the siege tower's plating. He curses again and reloads. You offer a quick nod of solidarity. This is your tribe, the soaked, sleepless defenders of stone. You remember the face of the young page who brought you that flask of spiced wine yesterday. You picture him now, huddled in the guard room, waiting for your return. Cold rain drives into your tunic. You lift a scrap of cloth and wipe it across your brow, smearing grit into your hair. You shiver, but your fingers remember the arc of release. You knock arrow after arrow, aiming for any gap in their makeshift armor. Each shot is a prayer you mutter silently. Keep them back, keep them off the wall, keep them from breaching your home. Suddenly a loud crack rings from the hoarding above you. A beam splinters under the weight of water, and you leap forward to catch the falling wood. You cradle it at your feet and jam it into a nearby notch, hammering it with your bow's pommel until it locks. The board shudders but holds. A cheer rises from the crumbling crew beside you. Relief floods your chest until you remember the attackers are still out there. You hack at the loosened end of the plank with the butt of your arrow, scrub away soaked splinters, and brace the edge with a scrap of rope. It's crude, but enough. You wipe the sweat from your palms, slick now from rain and pressure, and step back to test it. The board quivers under your weight but does not yield. You pump a fist and grin despite the cold. A flash of triumph warms you. Then a volley of stones rains down from the siege tower's mangonel. One pebble thuds against the hoarding floor a foot from your boot and skitters away. You hiss and lean out, spotting the rotor arm swinging above the attacker's head. You mark the pattern and release an arrow into its mechanism. The bolt lodges in a wooden brace. The tower shudders and the mangonel team flees, giving you clear sight once more. You seize the moment. You shrug off your cloak to free your arms and heft a skillet of boiling oil from its iron hook. Each step is deliberate. You balance the skillet's handle, drag the tripod across the hoarding floor, and position yourself above the gate. A shout from the captain echoes, "Enemy ladders are going up." You wrench the lever, and molten oil chases down the wooden rungs. Screams from below mix with the hiss of boiling fat. The stench of cooked wood and charred flesh drifts upward. You swallow hard and steady your trembling hand. The ladder below glows red as the oil eats into the wood. Enemy climbers tumble, hollering in panic. You bite back a triumphant laugh. Survival has its grotesque rewards. You peer ahead, their retreating forms vanish into the mud. For a heartbeat, the battlefield stills. Your chest heaves. You cup your hands and warm them on your own breath. Frost mingles with sweat on your brow. Through the swirling rain, you scan for the next threat. The siege tower has shifted down the line. Patrols reveal fresh crags in the hoarding. Gashes from enemy tools. You sprint along the wall walk, boots spitting water, and slam your hammer into the cleft, sealing it with a wedge of oak. Splinters rain down. You laugh. Pain and pride are the same heat in your veins. A sudden silence blankets the ramparts. You grip your spear, ready for a counterattack. Instead, a horn blast from the keep signals the approach of relief forces. Torches flicker along the inner curtain walls, and archers take up fresh crossbows. You exhale so hard your lungs ache. The final push will soon come. Rain slackens to a drizzle. Mud drips from every edge. You wipe your blade clean on your gambeson and glance at your comrades. Eyes meet and nod. Tomorrow you may be posted elsewhere. Tonight you will drink warm broth and rest blistered hands. But on this wall, for these soaked minutes, you held firm. You stood between home and ruin on boards. You shored up in half a storm in arms, heavy with fatigue and fury. You survived, scaling the curtain walls and defending them with every battered breath. The captain's voice rises. Stand down. You sheathe your spear, lower your hood, and step back from the parapet. Your boots squelch on the hoarding as you make way. Behind you, the mangled siege tower leans into the moat, splintered and smoking. You feel wonder at what you accomplished, and relief that you can stop. As you descend the ladder, each rung reverberates with the day's labor. By the time you reach solid ground, exhaustion wraps around you like a cloak thicker than any gambeson. But in your chest burns a furious pride. You survived. You defended. You are part of this fortress now, its stones, its walls, and its strange, unbreakable heart. From crenellations you peer out, pressing bows to your shoulder, knocking after knocking into the siege lines below while the wind howls through the battlements. Rain stings your face as you draw and release another arrow into the mass of shields and pikes. Each shaft finds a gap or shatters a helmet strap. You taste copper on your tongue and feel the hum of tension in every sinew. Above you, the stone merlons tremble under the wind's command, yet hold their ground. You are perched atop one of the castle's highest towers, and every heartbeat feels like a drum roll before the next volley. Your fingers are numb even through the gauntlets you wear. You twist a rope coil and lash it around a stout peg to keep your quiver close. The leather straps pin holes against the stone so that when you reach for arrows, they do not tumble in the wind. A rat scuttles past your boots, chasing a stray morsel of cheese. It pauses in your shadow, then bolts off again into the dark recess. In this height, life feels both nearer to heaven and deeper into the grime of siegecraft than anywhere else. A comrade appears behind you, carrying a barrel of pitch heated over the blacksmith's forge. You wedge the barrel on a carved stone bracket and feel the heat through your cloak. With a ladle, you scoop the viscous liquid into iron vessels set at the murder holes. Below, the enemy crouches under the rain, but soon they will feel the spray of hot tar. You tilt the ladle just enough to test the release mechanism. The handle creaks but holds firm. You smile at the promise of chaos you have crafted with your own hands. Damp boards lie ready for the new walkway you will build around the tower's edge. You unstrap planks from a beam stack, working with two fellow masons who grunt and cough at the cold smoke rising from their lanterns. Together you fit each plank into grooves carved into the coping stone. With every fit you drive wooden wedges home and hammer copper pegs until they ring clear. The boards form a safe path for archers to patrol, and for you to carry fresh supplies up and down the spiral staircase hidden within the wall. Wind gusts force you to brace your elbows against the crenel lip. You haul a heavy crossbow from its rack and check its trigger latch. Each cord is coated in grease to fight the damp air that would otherwise loosen the bowstring. You turn the windlass and cock it once more. The bolt rests snug in the groove. You sight through the slit and track an enemy officer pacing behind a shield wall. With a soft click, you release. The bolt sails and finds its mark. A cheer drifts up from the lower curtain as the enemy's formation stutters. High above you stoke the beacons on the tower top. You climb the narrow steps lined with flickering torches and emerge onto the platform where the iron brazier waits. You heap fresh wood into the flames and scatter glowing coals under a metal grill. Sparks drift into the wind that carries them over the valley below. Soon your signal will twinkle in the gloom, drawing friendly riders toward the walls and warning the foe that the fortress breathes with life. You return to the crenellation and check each arrow loop. Some stone edges have crumbled under the weight of crossbow fire. You crouch to chisel away a broken fragment and reshape the opening so that shots will fly true. Dust puffs into your lungs, but you tolerate the cough for the sake of precision. A quick brush with a rag sweeps the stone clear and sharpens the inner edge. Your work will let archers squeeze into position without jamming their bows or exposing too much of themselves to the enemy. A sudden rumble shudders through the tower. You grip the wall as a small section of battlement rocks loose, where an enemy mine must have thumped against the foundation. You sprint to the weak spot and pluck loose stones free. In seconds, you and 2 mates rebuild the gap with rough blocks hauled up by rope baskets. Mortar squeezed between the seams sets quickly in the chill air. You step back to test the repair, then nod at the apprentice nearby who pumps the winch to bring up a fresh basket. You pause to drink from a flask of watered wine. The sour liquid warms your chest and sharpens your focus. Below the trench you see enemy sappers probing the base of the tower with picks. You raise your bow and hurl a bolt that cracks the shaft of a pickaxe. The sapper curses and scuttles for cover. The moment of panic you created echoes through their ranks. You grin at the little victory earned in this high place. Night grows darker and the storm shows no mercy. You lace up extra strips of cloth around your legs and arms to fend off the chill. Your cloak is soaked through, but you wear it for extra padding against flying stones and splinters. In the flicker of the brazier, you check your blade strapped at your side. It is chipped and dull from the day's work. You sheath it with a promise to sharpen it come dawn. For now you stand, watch with bow in hand and spirit steeled against the wind's howl. At last, the captain's horn sounds from the courtyard below. Relief rotation will arrive in minutes. You tighten the rope lashings and hand off your bow to the fresh guard. You point out the chimed repairs and mortar seals so they know where to watch next. You step aside and let them take your place at the slit. You descend into the tower interior where a warm brazier crackles and a cup of thin stew waits. Each sip soothes your bones, but you know tomorrow you will climb these heights once again. In these towers you feel both small as a rat and vast as the sky all at once. Every stone you secure, every bolt you fire, every repair you make threads you into the fortress's living fabric. When dawn breaks through ragged clouds, you will be ready once more atop these walls, pressing arrow after arrow into the enemy's heart. Here, in the wind and rain, you proved that stones and mortar mean nothing without the hands that defend them. You step away from the slit with pride echoing in each aching joint. Your boots echo down the damp stone stairs as you step away from the arrow loop. The air tastes of smoke, sweat, and hot pitch. You shrug off your soaked cloak and hang it on a carved wooden peg before you inspect the weapon racks. Fletched arrows lean in neat bundles against the cold stone walls, while quarrels for crossbows rest in iron bins bound with leather straps. You count each shaft by feeling its length and weight in your gloved hand. A missing arrow rattles your heart. You lift a loose flagstone in the floor and retrieve a spare from the hidden cache. You drop the stone back into place and seal the seam with a pinch of mortar you carry in your pouch. With stocks tallied, you exhale a slow breath and move on. Torches flicker along the corridor as you approach the forge corner. Lantern smoke curls beneath the low ceiling, and the blacksmith's hammer rings against the anvil. You step forward and present a chipped blade for sharpening. The smith clamps it in a vise and runs a coarse stone along its edge while you wipe soot from your gauntlets. Sparks fly and glow against your tunic. Minutes later, the blade's edge gleams sharp enough to shave hair. You clamp the blade's tang into your belt and lift a handful of whetstone dust into your palm. You rub it across a dagger's haft until the handle loses its slick promise of slipping from your grip. Each tool restored brings a small surge of confidence. Beyond the forge, you find the sling cart where pouches of heated pitch and hoppers of lead shot await. You lift a heavy bucket and pour its viscous contents into iron pots set along the wall. Hot tar rises in smoky curls that sting your eyes. You nod to the apprentice who seals each pot with a wooden lid scored in chalk for cluing you into its contents. You tie a leather strap around each handle and haul them to the murder holes above the gatehouse. Inch by inch, you slide them along narrow ledges until they settle into iron cradles. You test each latch and give the rope a gentle tug to ensure it will hold when you need to spill its fury onto the enemy below. A distant rumble shakes the tower's foundation. and you pause to press a palm against the damp stone. The walls hum with the weight of siege engines beyond the moat. You trace your fingers along the mortar seams, checking for signs of cracking or movement. Where a hairline fracture appears, you mix quicklime and sand from a pouch, and press the paste into the gap. You smooth the joint with the back of your hand and step back to let it set. Fortress walls are nothing without the mortar that binds them, and every seam you seal means another chance to hold the line. The captain's shout drifts up from the courtyard, and you hurry to the map table carved into a flat slab of stone. A layer of dust nearly hides the chalk drawings of towers, walls, and gatehouses. You clear the surface with the cuff of your sleeve and study the positions of your comrades. You note the signal cords that link each tower beacon to the keep's central bell. You tug at one cord to test its tension and hear the distant clang echo in the hollow chambers below. Messaging wires must remain taut or smoke, and fire become useless in storm. Satisfied, you oil the pulleys and knot the spare line neatly against a hook. Your stomach growls, but there is no time for a proper meal. You spill a handful of dry biscuits into your palm and munch one while you inspect the rope ladders stored in a corner. Each rope is looped around wooden rungs and hung from iron hooks recessed in the ceiling. You check every knot and test a rung by pressing your weight upon it. The wood creaks but holds. If an emergency breach demands a quick descent, this ladder must save your life. You loop a coil under your arm and step back for the apprentice to replace it. You offer a nod of thanks and carry on. Dripping torches mark the entrance to a narrow slit where you peer out across the moat once more. The rain has slackened, and muddy footprints disappear in shallow puddles. You reach into a satchel at your waist and pull out a length of chalked twine. You stretch it across the slit to measure the opening. Each loop and knot matches the spacing carved into the embrasure. A miscalculation of a fraction of an inch sends arrows astray or leaves too much of you exposed. You tighten the twine and adjust the carved edges with a small hammer until the guidelines match. Precision here means life or death. At last, your relief arrives, in the form of 2 solemn guards carrying fresh arrows and a bowl of lukewarm broth. You exchange bows and step aside to let them take your place at the slit. You place a final arrow into a leather quiver and return the crossbow to its rack. The guards settle into position, peering through the embrasure as you guide them through the repairs you made. You point out the mortar seam, the tightened pulley, and the newly measured arrow loop. They nod and salute before you turn away. You descend the stairs one last time, dripping with rain and sweat. Each footstep on the worn stone weighs more than the last, yet you muster a steady pace. At the bottom, you join the small fire pit where sentries huddle beneath a sheltering awning. A ladle of watered ale is pressed into your hand, and you sip its bitter warmth. You feel the chill retreat a little as the fire crackles and pop. You settle onto a rough-hewn bench and stretch sore muscles. In the low glow, you watch smoke drift upward and imagine the siege engines stalled in the mud. You think of every bolt you fired, every seam you sealed, and every ladder you tested. The tower stands because of your hands and your will. A tension eases in your chest. Brief though it is, each moment of respite reminds you of why you endure. Tomorrow at dawn, you will return to these heights. You will count arrows, oil, crossbow strings, and fill pots with boiling pitch once more. Yet now you close your eyes for a few stolen breaths, and let the echo of your work settle. Around you, weary guards murmur prayers and tales of past victories. You lean back and savor the brief calm before the storm returns. In this tower, you have made your stand and earned your rest. You brace beside a stone murder hole as the cauldron flames flicker above your head and molten pitch hisses onto the enemy scaling ladder. A fiery droplet spits down and smacks the warped wood of the ladder like a hammer. You grit your teeth at the heat and twist the iron lever with every ounce of strength. Your gauntlet warms until it feels like molten lead pressed to your skin, but the ladder's slow collapse keeps you rooted in place. Behind you, the cauldron sits in a ring of iron chains suspended from carved brackets overhead. Flames lick the bottom of the kettle and turn the pitch inside into a thick black sea. You stir the molten brew with a long iron rod until it bubbles and spits like a caustic stew. A drop lands on a nearby stone and shatters into shards that glow orange in the gloom. You snort a bitter laugh as a spark flares at your boot. Other towers echo with the clang of stone against wood as fellows heave granite boulders through larger slits. You lean in and heft a jagged rock carved for this moment, then hurl it down on marauders below. The impact cracks open helmet rims and sprays muddy refuse over boots that dared to climb. Every projectile you send hurtles unerringly into the mass of shields far beneath you. You watch the chaos unfold like a brutal symphony of stone and flesh. Searing smoke and shrieks fill the air as men stagger from the moat soaked in fire and grime. One soldier trips and rolls back into the watery trench with a sputter of steam rising from his cloak. A foul rat skitters across his back and scampers off as if it too learned the lesson of scorching war. You yelp a laugh even as your heart races and the wind carries fresh threats from beyond the battlements. Beyond pitch and stones, you coordinate with the archers stationed along the wall walk. You send a quick whistle and watch as arrows rain into chaos like deadly rain. Then you turn to logs ready for dropping through wider openings. A comrade heaves an oak beam onto a plank above the gate, then tips it forward. It splinters, splashes mud and bone beneath as enemy bodies tumble back in stunned shock. If pouring pitch was not enough folly, you toss half-eaten onions from the cook's stockpile into the fray next. The smell of rot and vinegar mingles with burning pitch and steel alike. Some attackers gag and drop their shields to cover mouth and nose. The absurdity does not save them, but it feels good to sprinkle a bit of kitchen sabotage onto this brutal siege. You smirk at how medieval warfare blends sweat blood and stale provisions. Cold rain seeps into every seam of your gambeson and turns the stone floor into a patchwork of discrete puddles. Each splash underfoot risks sending oil flying back onto the wall walk. You keep knees bent and back lowered to steady yourself. A sudden gust whips flames back into your face, and you flinch away before returning to the mechanism. Your throat burns from smoke and pitch, but you press on. You catch sight of the siege captain pacing behind a shield tower below. He waves frantically and sends new iron jugs of shot up a rope ladder. You flash him a thumbs up, even with your gauntlet raised high. He chuckles and pantomimes a bow before slipping back into the fray. In this high place you feel both camaraderie and absurd distance from the chaos below. Friendships forged here burn as bright as the oil you pour. Brief respite arrives when the enemy falls back to reload siege engines. You take the chance to refill your cauldron with fresh pitch hauled by the engineer. You grip leather straps and pull a heavy bucket into the murder hole. Each tug leaves your arms shaking and your shoulders screaming. You steady your breath and replace the lid on the barrel with a firm thud. Fuel and ammo are your lifeblood in this furnace of war. Your hands are raw and slick with grime, but you would not trade this for warmth or ease. You feel alive in the roar of battle. Each hiss of boiling pitch and crash of stone against stone quickens your pulse. Fear flares in your chest, but you harness it into focus. This is no place for pity or fancy comfort. This is raw survival, and you embrace every searing moment. As daylight fades and torches burn more bright, you lean into the last pour of the watch. A final stream of molten fire slides through the embrasure and wells into the moat below. The enemy's assault grinds to a halt under that flood of heat and fury. You slam the lever closed with a roar of satisfaction and step back from the gaping hole. You wipe sweat and pitch from your brow and gather your tools. Your legs tremble after the endless heave of flipping levers and hoisting barrels, but you carry pride in every blister and burn. Relief arrives in the form of fresh guards, bearing lanterns and flasks of ale. You raise a hand in salute before descending into the warmth of the guardroom. You know that the siege will not rest, but for this hour you held the line with burning oil and iron will. You survived pouring boiling oil and raining down projectiles from these towering walls. The cauldron may cool, and the murder hole may lie silent for a moment, but tomorrow you will return to this post and face the fury once more. You squeeze into a narrow loophole pressed against rough stone that glooms like ancient bone beneath the fading sun. Your elbow digs into the ledge and your bowstring hums under your fingers as you draw back another fire arrow. Smoke curls around your ankles, and the acrid scent of burning pitch stings your nose. Through the slit, you see dark shapes massing in the evening light below the wall. Each man staggers under armor and shield while torches flicker like warning beacons along their lines. Your heart hammers against your ribs as you settle the arrow's shaft against the bow's groove. You taste grit on your tongue and feel the coarse stone bite into your palm as you aim at the moving ranks. A silent command echoes in your mind, and you release. The arrow flares into life, a streak of ember against the sky, and arcs toward the enemy camp. You watch it sail above the wreckage of fallen ladders before plunging into a heap of tents. Flames erupt at the impact, and tents collapse like torches blown out under a hand. You draw back again without pause between your breaths. The wall's thickness presses on your shoulders, and the weight of the rampart seems to steady your aim. A comrade to your left counts off the rhythm of your shots in a low voice that rattles against the stone. You feel the pulse of battle in every exhale and every finger curl. The dying light catches the edge of your arrow fletching and turns it into a tiny flame skimming the air. Below the wall you glimpse rats fleeing the flames and riders scrambling to shove burning wood from their lean-to structures. You knock another arrow and test the wind's direction. A sudden gust carries smoke toward you, and you cough into your sleeve. You press your cheek against the cold granite and adjust your stance. The arrow flies from your hand, cleaving through the dusky sky. You track its path until the shaft embeds in a siege engine's wheel and brings the mechanism to a shuddering halt. Night falls thicker now, and torches glow brighter in the camp. You switch to plain arrows to conserve flares that burn brief and bright. You draw back and watch the moon's pale face reflect in your eyes as you steady your breath. The world narrows to the slit, and the creatures moving beyond it. You see armor plates gleam, then vanish into shadow as enemy soldiers duck for cover. Your next shot cracks a shield boss and sends metal shards skittering across the earth with a clatter that rings hollow. A sudden shout shatters the hush, and a volley of return fire whistles past your head. You duck behind the embrasure and draw a deep breath before popping your head up again. You spit out a mouthful of grit and smile at the absurdity of risking life for flaming sticks. You knock another arrow and draw your bow until your muscles tremble with effort. The arrow's tip glows faintly red in the moonlight, and you let it fly toward the scatter of tents that still smolder. Your fingers burn where the fletching rubs against fine cracks in the stone. You shift your weight to ease the ache and press your palm into the rough surface beneath. You feel lived in history under your skin. Each arrow you loose writes your story into the night air. You savor the moment before you draw again and repeat the dance of flame and wood against steel and flesh. When your quiver empties, you slide back from the slit and step onto the wall walk. The air tastes of victory and smoke. A fellow archer hands you fresh arrows from a leather bundle. You nod and accept them with a glance at the silent tents below. Some still burn, and men scurry to douse the flames. You wipe sweat from your brow and settle back into the embrasure for one more round. Your heart slows as the enemy lines stagger under the broken wheels and scattered fire. Yet you remain vigilant. You knock a final fire arrow and draw deep on the bowstring. You imagine the flame dancing on the tip and feel the surge of purpose in every muscle fiber. You release and watch the spark arc into the darkness. Then you drop the bow, lean against the stone, and let the weight of the wall cradle you as you catch your breath and prepare for whatever comes next. You carve out timber galleries above the wall face and brace oak beams beneath fear and adrenaline as rain soaks through your chainmail shirt. The first beam lands on the carved stone corbels with a thud that echoes down the wall walk. You wedge it into place with a wooden mallet and feel every muscle in your arms burn as you force it home. Above you the sky groans with thunder and the wind whips rain into your eyes, but you dare not pause. With the beam secured, you lift a plank from a muddy pile and slide it along the oak support until it rests in the notch you cut yesterday. Your gloved hands slip on the slick wood, but you grit your teeth and haul it flush. Each plank locks against the next in a rickety gallery meant to keep you from plunging into the moat below. You hammer copper pegs through pre-drilled holes until the plank rings with each strike. Rain slides down the gallery boards in thin rivulets, and you brace both feet on the wet surface. You reach for the next beam and steady it against the stone face. Your comrade shouts something that you cannot hear over the gale. You nod and fit the beam into blocks of oak you have already slotted into the wall. Each beam must bear the weight of torches, boiling oil, or even a launched boulder. You test it with a heel and feel it hold under your weight. Next, you carry heavy lengths of timber up a rope basket. The basket swings in the storm like a pendulum of dread. You guide it into the gallery and tip the pieces onto the sloping floor. You clutch one end of a timber gallery support and wedge it upright beneath the outer edge of the new walkway. It groans as you lever it into place, but settles when you hammer the base into the muddy earth below. The wind tears at your hood, and you lean into the wall for shelter as you pick up a length of rope coated with raindrops. You wrap it around the gallery railing and tie a quick knot taut enough to hold a barrel of oil but loose enough to untie with northern numb fingers. The rope tangles in your gloves and you curse the work beneath the storm. Yet every knot you tie tightens the fortress against the coming storm of steel. A shout from below warns that enemy sappers are probing the outer wall. You peer through the new hoarding's wooden lattice and spot dark shapes where mud slumps into the trench. You draw an arrow from a leather case you strapped to a peg above your head, then draw your bow to send a warning volley. The arrow thuds into a battered helmet, and the sapper staggers back. You flinch as it whizzes past the gallery railing. You turn back to the machicolation you carved into the gallery floor. The opening yawns above the enemy's path like a hungry maw. You set aside your bow and heft a bucket of heated pitch hauled by a rope team below. The cauldron sits centered in the gallery with iron chains slung from a crossbeam. You pour a ladleful into the machicolation's funnel, then tip the bucket with a grunt. Hot, black pitch snakes down through the hole and drips onto mud and soldier alike. A comrade hurls a moss-covered boulder through a larger opening, and it crashes among the enemy shields. You add your voice to the roar of stone meeting flesh and wood. You taste salt on your lips from the rain and from sweat. You lash another beam beneath the gallery to strengthen the joist before pulling down a board to clear a loose splinter that threatened to give way under weight. Every movement tests your balance and your nerves. Your boots slide on the soaked gallery planks, and you catch yourself by gripping the carved posts that support the railing. Water drips through cracks in the posts and pools on the gallery floor. You press a boot to the wall's face to steady yourself, then hammer another peg into a beam base. As dusk falls, torches are lit along the hoarding's outer edge. Their flames flicker through rain and wind and cast dancing shadows on the stone face. You step back to admire the gallery you helped erect. It curves along the wall like a wooden crown of thorns built to rain down terror on attackers below. Your comrade offers you a flagon of watered ale drawn from the guardroom stocks. You thank him with a nod, then pour a gulp into your mouth. The warmth spreads through your chest and steadies your shaking hands. You wipe your mouth on the back of your sleeve and resume work without hesitation. By midnight, the last beam is set and the gallery stands ready. You test its strength by stomping once. The boards creak but hold firm. You crawl through the machicolation one last time and peer through the narrow gap. Below the trench is empty save for slick mud and the huddle of retreating campfires. You wink at the darkness and step back onto the gallery floor. Your heart pounds with pride and exhaustion. You gaze up at the high wall and feel its ancient stones press against your vision. The hoarding and machicolations you deployed will breathe life into these walls and buy every defender precious seconds. You hook your tools onto the railing and catch your breath. Rain still patters on the gallery roof above, where you nailed rough boards in place. You shiver beneath the sodden cloak but feel a spark of defiance in your chest. You helped build this wooden shield for the fortress and proved that even barren stone can be made to bend under the weight of human will. You descend the ladder in the quiet that follows the storm. Each rung slopes with wet wood, but you grip firmly and make your way down. At ground level, you join the watch beneath the inner wall. You warm your hands at the brazier and look up at the gallery you built. It juts from the wall like a fierce promise. You nod with satisfaction and lean into the heat. A long watch lies ahead, but tonight you know the walls stand stronger for your toil. You shuffle into the inner bailey before dawn, with mud sucking at your boots and the tang of smoke in the cold air. The rebel barrage has quieted for now, but the walls still tremble with echoes of stone and scream. You join a half-dozen defenders around a low brazier, where a cook ladles thin porridge into wooden bowls. Each man carries scars of the siege from yesterday. You take your bowl and peel away a crust of stale bread floating at the top. The taste is bitter, but you swallow every spoonful, knowing it may be your last full meal for days. You pass a second bowl to a young soldier whose cheek gleams with fever. He coughs into his sleeve and manages a weak nod. You pull your cloak tighter and slip him a scrap of dry bread torn from your own ration. The loaf is hard as stone, yet still crumbly enough to bite. You dab hot porridge onto the bread to soften it and coax him to eat. Sweat beads on his brow even though the dawn is cold. You remind him that he must keep strength if he hopes to stand watch when the horns call again. A low moan draws your gaze to the latrine area where others lie, wrapped in blankets. A healer moves among them, carrying vinegar and cloth. You kneel beside a comrade whose arm is stained dark with old blood. The healer cleans the wound and you press a fresh bandage into place. You tuck the cloth under his elbow and tie it tight enough to staunch the bleeding. He winces, but keeps silent, trusting your steady hand. You slip him a swig of water and clasp his shoulder. You cannot cure every infection, but you can offer comfort and care. You climb onto a crude scaffold beside the well to fetch water. The bucket rattles on its rope as you lower it into the depths. Each tug feels heavier than the last, as you lift a lifeline of hope toward the sky. The well's water level has dropped alarmingly, and you pray it holds until relief arrives. You glance at the rope anchor and give it an extra twist to keep it from slipping under the weight. You dip a leather cup into the bucket and gulp the cold liquid. It tastes of earth and iron, but it is sweet in your mouth. You carry 2 cups back to the wounded and the shivering. You wipe the rim of each cup on your tunic to catch drips. A soldier beside you shares a crust of cheese wrapped in cloth. You tear it in half and press the salty wedge into his hand. It is meager, but it lifts his spirits enough to crack a half smile. You hear him murmur a joke about the cook's porridge, and even the healer chuckles. Laughter in these walls tastes like victory. You return to the fire and find a crust of cold meat offered by another defender who remembers when you shared your last piece of bread. You chop it into small chunks with your knife and stir it into the porridge pot. The thick bits float on the ash-dark surface but bring welcome flavor. You ladle hearty rations into each bowl until none remains. Hunger may gnaw your belly, but camaraderie warms your heart. A sudden tremor rocks the bailey as the rebels fire another catapult. Stones thud against the outer wall and dust showers down from the battlements above. You shield your face with an arm and toss fresh straw into the brazier to banish the choking grit. The cook shouts for hands to clear cooking fires, and you seize a shovel to brush away debris. You work in unison with fellow defenders until the smoke clears and the dust settles. When the threat subsides, you gather near the forge corner where battered weapons lie. You pick up a rusting sword and test its edge. It is dull, but serviceable. You oil the blade with fat from your pouch, so it will not seize in battle. Nearby, a crossbow bolt wobbles loose in its stock. You press it back into slot and tighten the cord with careful turns. Every weapon you repair could save a life before nightfall. You pace to the guardroom where plans hang on painstakingly drawn wooden boards. You trace the rebel positions marked in chalk and tally the days of rations left. The numbers shrink alarmingly, but you remember that days can stretch into weeks when siege lines falter. You secure a scrap of charcoal in your belt and notch off every tally. Each mark is a promise to endure until the final horn sounds. By midday, the rain returns, hammering the tents and drenching every makeshift shelter. You return to the wounded and hand out woolen cloaks, soaked through yet warmer than nothing. You wrap a blanket around the fevered soldier and press a cup of hot broth into his hands. He drinks gratefully, then drifts into a fitful sleep. You wipe a tear from your cheek, but steel your shoulders against grief. Survival demands focus. The hour grows late, and you join the evening muster at the garrison gate. Torches flare along the walls, casting long shadows on weary faces. You take your place among the line and grip your spear shaft with numb fingers. The well must hold until dawn, and the sick must survive until rescue. You breathe deep and bow your head. In this moment, you make a vow with every heartbeat to endure the cold hunger, pain, and fear. Night falls, and the inner bailey grows silent, save for moans and the drip of water from leaky roofs. You settle by the brazier with a handful of dry biscuits and a flask of wine dregs. The liquid burns going down, yet soothes your throat. You pass cups in a quiet circle and share stories of distant home. You speak of warm hearths, soft beds, and laughter that feels like sunlight. For a few flickering moments, you taste peace. At last, you lie on your straw pallet beneath a torn blanket that feels rough against your skin. The rain seeps through overhead patches, but you ignore the chill that creeps up your spine. Your mind drifts to the high walls, still holding strong, and the comrades standing guard. You pray the well will not run dry, and the relief force will come soon. You close your eyes and whisper a prayer to anything that listens. You wake hours later to the clang of the watch bell perched in the keep's tower. Your body aches from endless toil, but you rise anyway. You shoulder your cloak and slip into the pre-dawn gloom. The inner bailey lies still beneath swirling mist. You step toward the well once more and grasp the rope with steady hands. The bucket settles in the water and you haul up fresh life. You pour it into cups for the new watch and share a nod of solidarity. You glance at your fellow defenders and see resolve burning in their eyes. Though hunger and disease may claim some, you know the fortress lives through the strength of shared will. You scoop porridge into bowls and pass them down the line. Each man receives sustenance in silence as dawn light seeps between battered tent flaps. You taste salt and hope mingled in that simple meal. If you can endure one more sunrise, you can endure another day of this siege. You scramble up the hastily repaired ladders at the heart of the curtain wall. The wood creaks under each foot as rain soaks through your mail and slicks the rungs with mud. Your palms slip on the damp timber, but you clamp your grip on the side rails and haul yourself onto the wall walk. Behind you, the garrison horn echoes from the gatehouse and you taste iron on your tongue. You take in the sight of enemy forces massed below shields, locked together in a grey wall of steel, pikes bristling like the teeth of some monstrous maw. You draw a deep breath and ready your first stone. A hail of arrows whistles past and thuds into the wall beside you. You twist and catch a smooth river rock, heft its weight in your hand, and let it fly. It arcs through the rain and strikes a soldier climbing the ladder, sending him tumbling backward into the muck. Cheers rise from your comrades as you seize a heavier chunk of granite and follow up with another devastating throw. The enemy ladder shudders beneath the impact, rungs cracking under the weight of armored men. You meet the eyes of the captain at the far end of the wall and nod. This final defense will stand. You pivot and draw a fine oak shaft from your quiver. Its fletching is damp, but still true in flight. You knock the arrow and aim through one of the narrow slits carved into the battlement. You let fly, and watch the flame-tipped shaft arc into the enemy's ranks. It strikes a powder keg of pitch they had prepared, and a column of fire bursts upward, splintering shields and scattering men from the base of the wall. You feel heat on your face, even through the rain, and know this moment could turn the tide. Beside you, a fellow archer catches fresh shafts from the supply runner. You clap him on the shoulder without breaking your stance, and he offers you a free arrow. You nod and fire again, this time at a siege tower that creaks under the pounding rain. The arrow finds a rotted panel and sparks a small flame. The tower shudders and its wheels lock in the mud. Behind that collapse your comrades man the lower wall walk, sending down rocks onto the trapped engine until it lies broken. Thunder booms overhead and echoes through every stone of the fortress. You brace against the parapet and scan for more threats. Beyond the broken siege tower, you see pikes shifting to form a final charge. Their lines close in under ragged banners that whip in the wind. You let out a sharp whistle and raise your rock again. The captain responds with a blast on the horn. You and your comrades let loose a torrent of stones and fire shafts in unison, a deadly rain that smashes shields and drives men backward into the trench. In the flicker of torchlight, you catch sight of the enemy's lieutenant rallying his men. He raises his sword but finds no path forward. His men waver, weapons lowering as they struggle to hold their ground in the mud. At that moment, you seize your chance. You launch a final volley of arrows streaking like meteors into the dim field below. You hear a whistle of retreat as the enemy breaks ranks and flees back across the plain. Adrenaline surges through your veins as you watch their panicked flight. You scramble to the edge of the wall and peer down through a murder hole, tipping a bucket of cold water on any straggler who dares follow. Below the moat glistens under torchlight, the water churned with mud and lost weapons. The enemy lines are gone, scattered beyond help and hope. You stand breathless, rain plastering your hair to your brow, and grasp the cold stone as if you might slip from exhaustion. Your comrades rally to your side, cheering in hoarse voices that rasp against the storm. The captain strides up and clasps you by the shoulder, his gauntlet shaking against your cuirass. He lifts his sword in salute, his face streaked with soot and sweat. You offer a weary grin in return. Together you stand, watch, as the last embers of the assault flicker out in the darkness. At last, you descend the ladder into the inner bailey, legs quivering from hours of unceasing battle. You step onto muddy ground and join the sentries who lift their spears in salute. The smell of wet leather and hot iron hangs in the air. You pass a flask of ale to the archer beside you and share a long-drawn swallow that burns going down but fills you with warmth. Behind you, the fortress gates swing open to allow your relief forces inside. You lean against the wall and watch ranks of guards and fresh troops file in. Torches blaze along the ramparts, and pathlights guide wagons bearing water and rations. The defeated rebels sink to their knees beneath the outer ward, prisoners of a fortress that refused to fall. You lift your head and take in the sight of the walls you helped defend. Every stone, every plank of hoarding, every machicalation you built stands unbroken. The rain begins to ease, leaving a silver sheen on every surface. You taste victory in the damp air, and know that on this night you earned your place among the defenders. Your bones ache with every movement, but your spirit soars. You helped repel the final assault and held your home against impossible odds. You served the fortress with stone and shaft, and will stand ready should another storm arise. But for now, you close your eyes, and let the sound of cheers and relief wash over you. You have endured the fury of the siege and found triumph in every roar of battle beneath these walls. You wake with each muscle screaming protest, your arms locked in cramps from hauling stone and swinging hammers. Your throat feels raw from shouting orders into gale winds, and the cold air rasps past your cracked lips. Every breath pulls hunger deeper into your bones, a hollow ache that no porridge or stale biscuit can ever fully fill. Yet you rise anyway because each dawn brings fresh stones to set and fresh foes to face. If you think weakness will spare you the work, you are mistaken. This life demands every ounce grit you can muster. By mid-morning, your fingers split open on rough stone and mail chafes your ribs with every movement. You lift a heavy block from the rubble pile, water dripping from its surface in cold rivulets. You place it in the mortar bed and tap it into the line of the wall, feeling the weight in your back and shoulders. Your arms tremble under the effort, but you refuse to pause. A single misaligned course can spell disaster when siege engines arrive. This work is precise and brutal by turns, and there is no mercy in its dance. Hunger gnaws at you like a living thing, You remember the cook's promise of a hearty stew, but find only thin broth and a few lumps of turnip in your bowl. You swallow quickly, your jaw aching from cold and toil, and step back into the fray. Below the ramparts, you hear the enemy's drums and horn calls. You steady your nerves by gripping the stone merlin beside you and tasting its cold hardness under your fingertips. You whisper a vow that if you can survive this day, you will never take a warm bed for granted again. Your comrades move like ghosts in the mist that curls across the ramparts. One hauls fresh mortar from the forge, while another strings arrow loop and directs crossbow fire. You exchange a brief nod with each soul you pass, grateful for their presence and strength. Alone you would collapse in despair, but together you stand firm as living defense for every stone you lay and every beam you brace. You learn in those silent exchanges that your spirit lives in the bond you share. By afternoon, the rain seeps through every layer of your garb until you feel wet to the skin. You trudge to the well at the yard center to haul water for the masons and archers. Each bucket weighs like lead and pulls at your arms until your hands betray you with blisters. You grit your teeth and continue because water is life, and every drop you deliver fuels another wall course or another arrow. You know that if the well runs dry, you will face thirst amid battle, and nothing can survive that. As darkness creeps ahead of the sun, you light torches along the hoardings and machicolations you helped install. You watch flames dance on rain-slick wood and iron loops. The floating sparks remind you how close you stand to oblivion with every spark that flies free. You huddle with fellow defenders in the guardroom for a moment to share a flask of watered ale. It numbs the cold that grips your chest and steels you for the night watch. You share whispered stories of home and half-forged dreams of warmth. For a flicker of comfort, you forget the stones pounding your back. Suddenly, the enemy breaks cover beyond the outer wall and you scramble for your spear. You run along the gallery you built, rain dripping in your eyes, and leap onto the wall walk just as rocks and arrows rain down. You hurl the nearest boulder through a murder hole and watch it splatter wood and mud below. You loose a crossbow bolt into a lantern that flares into sparks and plunges the courtyard into flickering shadows. You roar with adrenaline as the attack crashes against stone you helped shape. When the assault falters, you cannot collapse in relief because even victory demands vigilance. You scan the field with blood pounding in your ears until you see the enemy retreat. You feel tears. They burn your cheeks and taste of sweat and rain. You carve a small notch in your memory where your heart stood firm. You feel proud in that moment to be part of something greater than yourself. At midnight, you return to the inner bailey where the wounded lie huddled under cloth scraps. You kneel beside the lantern glow and press fresh bandages to torn flesh. You whisper encouragement you barely feel. You share crusts of bread and swigs of water. You marvel that in this place of ruin and ruinous loss you still find kindness. By the second dawn, your body feels ancient and broken. You stand atop the wall once more, frost stiffening your hair, and catch sight of the rising sun through tattered clouds. You feel dread and wonder swirl in your chest. You think of the life you left behind and the primitive stone place that has claimed you now. You wonder how any soul could endure these hours more than once. You spread your arms wide and lean forward for balance, tasting the wind's bite on your tongue. You imagine the crowdless world below waiting to fall silent at your feet. You imagine the echoes of your hammer and the chorus of your cries. You imagine your name carved into a single stone among countless others. And then you feel the hammering of the enemy's drums once more. You straighten and tighten the sling around your waist. You raise your spear and tighten your grip on the stone merlon. You lift your gaze to the surveying heights of the tower and vow that today you will defend every course you placed, every beam you braced, and every family that sleeps within these walls. If you can survive this day, you will know the fierce pride of defending your own work with your own body. You will know that stone and mortar are nothing without the human will that shapes them. But you would not last a day if you thought yourself invincible. You would falter under cold hunger, pain, and fear. You would crumble beneath the weight of responsibility and the echo of battle. Yet through every blister and bruise you stand, because every stone you help raise is a testament to your resolve, and in that resolve you find purpose and power. You learn that those who endure are those whose spirit refuses to break at first light or last breath. So you wipe the rain from your eyes and sharpen your spear tip on stone. You steady your feet on the wall, walk and breathe deep the scent of wet earth and iron. You feel the world tilt beneath a single promise. You will not yield this day. You will not yield as long as breath remains in your lungs and work remains to be done. And in that moment, you become more than a builder or a soldier. You become the living stone that holds this fortress against any storm.